It's day trading week on risers and fallers. We've got some short-term values to get you through October, as well as some fallers that you're going to want to move off of before the market realizes their true value, right here on Player Profiler. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a solo week for old Chucky Bass. Evan is off, but he'll be back with us next week, so it might be a little unhinged. I've got my Emeka Ibuka shirt freshly ready in as he misses this week, unfortunately, so hopefully the things aren't correlated. Let's do this. I'm going to hit you guys with 4 risers and 4 fallers this week, 1 at each position, as we try to make our way through spooky season. October it is. Let's get to our first guy, running back Tyjae Spears. Look at that beautiful, handsome man. He's back in our lives. He is up to RB 47 in the Player Profiler seasonal rankings, RB 41 on the week with just 7.3 projected points, but he's still working his way back into things. He is playing the Patriots, Mike Vrabel, revenge game, coming into Tennessee. They cleaned house. It's not looking very good for the Titans, but one of the few bright spots is Tyjae Spears. On an otherwise collapsing offense, he immediately showed a return to that prior burst and athleticism that we saw in the final 3 weeks of last season when he was finally given a little bit more of a role. He dominated in the receiving department, and he was a legitimate RB1 through Christmas time. He was my only Christmas present. Hopefully he was for you guys as well. This team has no explosion, no pop, no juice. He's the only guy that can change that, much like Cam Scadaboo's done in New York, much like Woody Marks is trying to do in Houston. Not necessarily the same type of players, but we're talking about teams that needed a punch, and they're getting that punch. He already matched Tony Pollard's rushing as well. Last week, it took Pollard 10 attempts to get to 34 yards, and Spears nearly eclipsed that on only 5 rushes. So it's coming. Game script is going to favor him. This team is trailing all day, every day. Not really worried about the lack of goal line touches because they don't get to the goal line. They are a league worst 17% of their drives reach the red zone. So I'm not worried about that. This is an offense that's dead last in rushing success rate, bottom 4 in rushing EPA, and they're in a free fall. The coach is gone, and with Brian Callahan goes Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, which honestly I wish he stuck around because it would have been such a win for dads. His dad takes the Raiders to the Super Bowl, and his son gets fired in 24 games. Let's go all the dads out there. But that aside, the offensive line is getting paid like a top 5 unit, and they're performing like a bottom 3 unit. And they don't have any excuses because everybody's, for the most part, healthy. So you're going to tell me that they're going to let go of a guy that has been coaching offensive line longer than I've been breathing, and it's going to get better? I don't know. But a glass half full guy might say it's not going to get any worse. That's a whole lot of words to say. Tyjae Spears will be getting passing production in this offense. I'm not going to waste time projecting Tony Pollard to get traded. I think this will be a split backfield. And in those cases, you guys know we always like the pass catching talents when it's an even keel. So he's a stash. Let's see what the offense does. I like his projected upside way more than other guys in similar situations. Bam Knight, Kendre Miller, Jerome Ford, all of that. So let's move on to our second guy here. Kendrick Bourne, week winner. I'm hesitant to say league winner, but this guy is crushing it back-to-back 142-yard games. He is up to wide receiver 48 on our player profiler seasonal ranks. He's wide receiver 43 this week with 10.7 projected points against the Falcons. We're talking wide receiver 1 status here. And I mean that a little bit more from a vibe standpoint than maybe statistically and how anybody would ever rank him. But he's just been a complete stud in back-to-back weeks, 23.4% target share, 21.7 points per game. Kendrick Bourne. And he is a must-start while Ricky Pearsall remains out indefinitely with that PCL injury. Not even sure if Brandon Ayuk is still alive. Juwan Jennings has got every injury in the medical book. 5 broken ribs, high ankle sprain, low ankle sprain, and he is not having it with the coaching staff as well. So things aren't looking good that direction. Mac Jones does get the start again this week, and Bourne has been his guy. He was his guy in New England. He was vocal about bringing him over to San Francisco, and we're seeing why. 49ers have been number 1 in neutral pass rate, mainly due to a couple things. Putrid rushing attack. McCaffrey's getting the ball a ton, but he's not doing a lot with it on the ground. And the defense has been forced into a lot of positive game scripts for these wide receivers. So we love that. George Kittle does return this week, and that probably bumps Bourne down from the greatest wide receiver in the history of mankind to a high upside flex play. And that could remain the case. That could remain the case until we get more clarity on what's going on with this wide receiver room. So you are betting on Kendrick Bourne versus the injury status of other 49ers players. And that is basically hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. I would ride this out as long as it goes. It doesn't probably have a long shelf life, but we're here for a good time, not a long time. And I will say, if you're a good team in a good position, I wouldn't mind selling high here if you can even get something decent back for him from a talent standpoint. Just because I don't know what the relationship with Brock Purdy will look like. Purdy did make Jawan Jennings a thing, and I'm putting that solely on Purdy right now. I don't doubt this team's ability to prop up Rando. So just something to consider if you can wrangle somebody else in. Let's move on to our next guy here. A guy who probably does not ever get talked about, and for a good reason, but I'm just happy to bring him up as I'm wearing my Emeka Egbuka shirt. Cade Otton, tight end, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's only tight end 36 in our player profile or seasonal ranks, and that feels right. However, he's up to tight end 14 on the week with 9.3 projected points against the Lions. This is short-term games. That's why I said day trading at the top of the show. It's likely that Evans is out again this week, or if he's not, he's definitely going to the game banged up. Godwin and Egbuka are for sure gone. And it's as simple as this. Last year, with the top targets out of this offense, Godwin out, Evans out, Cade Otton averaged 16 fantasy points per game as the number one receiving option and had 3 consecutive top 5 finishes at the position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was a great pickup for a few weeks, and that's all we're looking for right now. And he has a great rapport with Baker, especially when it comes to stepping up. And this year, with Evans gone, he's had back-to-back games of 5 targets and over 50 yards, making a little bit of a splash, and that's with Egbuka and Godwin on the field. Let's mix in some touchdowns there and see what the next couple of weeks give us until the bye. But my gut instinct here is that Tampa is going to be undermanned for a majority of this season. So, how high his ceiling is and how low his floor is are to be determined, but this is a team going through the injury bug right now, about as bad as any team in the league. So he's somebody you want to keep an eye on. I don't expect a huge step up from the rookies, Johnson and Johnson. I have a Vax joke written in here, but I think I'm going to skip it. And Sterling Shepard is fun, but fun doesn't always get you where you want to be. It doesn't always get you fantasy points. And one last thing on Cade. He has got a beautiful matchup against the Lions this week, who just resurrected Travis Kelce's career. And of course, the Saints, who have given up 3 touchdowns to tight ends over the last 3 games. Now, let's get to our very last guy here, Sam Darnold. Look, Sleeper doesn't have to be the only one having fun, wacky, zany profile pictures for guys. Player Profiler is getting in on the action down there. This is our picture for Sam Darnold at the moment. Up to QB 22 on our seasonal rankings. QB 20 on the week was a 16.3 projected points against the Texans. Matchup thing, I get it, but they are at home. This is after the classic week 1, which is AKA the week 4 preseason game, Darnold is averaging 19.8 fantasy points per contest. He's the quarterback 6 in that time frame. Back-to-back games of 295 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3rd in passing yards overall, 5th in touchdowns, and 3rd in my favorite money throws. He is slinging it. Number 1 in yards per attempt, 4th in air yards, 4th in EPA, number 1 on first down rate. He is having a season, and he's doing it with, obviously JSN is having a first-team All-Pro season, but Cooper Kupp, Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner, the run game isn't giving him anything. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He is far and away the number 1 thrower of the deep ball, which is what you want from a fantasy quarterback that does not use his legs very often. You want those yards per attempt to be up. You want him slinging it downfield. We want touchdowns. Here are some guys that are ranked ahead of him right now that I would take him over in a heartbeat. Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Bryce Young, Matthew Stafford, Jordan Love, and of course the lifts stops right before the people's champ, Mac Jones. He is showing the world that last year wasn't a fluke. This is a true career revival, which of course means he's destined to have less than 10 points this week against the Texans. But this is the kind of guy you want on your team. He is an MVP candidate, and I would love for you to pick him up if you have the opportunity, especially with how putrid the quarterback position is right now. Now, we are going to take a quick break from your usual programming, but when we come back, we'll go over some players who tried to repent, but unfortunately, some followers just cannot change their fantasy ways.
So let's put our hoodie on and let's talk about Player Profiler's DFS Dominator. It has a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Billy and Bradley and Evan and that Player Profiler AI engine to create cash game lineups that certainly have a high floor, but also give you that ceiling. Now, you've probably heard about the most powerful tool of all, our Lineup Genius. We know winning GPPs requires a completely different approach, which is why our Lineup Genius takes you through the process of selecting the quarterbacks in the juiciest matchups. Then it highlights the stacks and runbacks that are available available, lets you pick the chalk level, lets you pick the level of correlation with a number of other proprietary settings available to you. Click a button and it generates hundreds of lineups to be imported into FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's just $45 a year, not a week, a year. So go fight fire with a Player Profiler DFS Dominator.
All right, let's go from one Seattle Seahawk who's trending up to one who, in my personal opinion, could not be trending more down. Zach Charbonnet. He sits at RB. He is down to RB 35 on our Player Profiler seasonal ranks. He's sitting at RB 32 on the week with only 10 projected points against the Texans. Big exhale for this one, guys. Everything revolving around this Seahawks running back rotation is giving me the kind of mental hemorrhoids that no neurologist in the Western Hemisphere is equipped to handle. He's reached a near even timeshare with Kenneth Walker, which continues to blow my mind. The staff has given him a season high in snaps last week, and he only managed to turn that into not only a nothing burger from a stat line, 24 yards, but he had his highest stuff rate of the season, and that's brutal. That is brutal. That is not what you want from a guy who is supposed to be your chain mover when you're trying to protect the lead. He's doing nothing. That's why Sam Darnold is taking on so much of this burden, because they can't run the ball with Charbonnet. They're doing a better job with it with Walker, although it's not blowing anybody away. But I just don't know. I cannot wrap my mind around what the thought process is here. Zach Charbonnet does not have a single game with over 50 scrimmage yards, and yet he's led the team in snap share 4 out of the 5 games he's played. I could stomach all this if he was out playing Kenneth Walker, don't get me wrong, but you stack up their side-by-sides, and it's just not only from a productivity standpoint, but from a metric standpoint, it is legitimately like comparing a glass of Pappy Van Winkle 23 year to the spit bucket at a wine tasting in Mississippi. It is not great, Bob. Walker is top 20 or top 24. I'll give you a little range here. Yards, touchdowns, yards per carry, juke rate, tackles broken, breakaway runs, on and on and on and on and on. Charbonnet ranges well into the 40s, 50s, and 60s out of all the running backs in many of these. And I understand that there's a physicality and a consistency to his running style that the staff enjoys, but it's not producing anything. The team is also hot as hell, so I'm not sure what the incentive is to change up what they're doing. My thesis here is that despite everything going in Zach Charbonnet's favor, we're getting anywhere from RB 27 to RB 68 results. And that's going to be a big no for me, dog. So I have him as a faller. Let's see what ends up happening. Next up here is kind of tough for me to talk about. Michael Pittman, down to wide receiver 31 on our seasonal ranks. He will be our wide receiver 35 this week with only 11.3 projected points against the Chargers. This one hurts, like I said, because I think of all the fallers we'll go over today, I think this is probably the only guy I would describe as a good football player. Would love to have him on my team. I think he's a quality wide receiver who I think does a lot of things that deserve more fantasy production, yet he just can't get it. Season low in usage against the Cardinals, which coincides with Josh Downs, of course, having a season high. Happy to see Downs back, of course, and thriving. But Daniel Jones continues to find the open man, and more often than not, that's usually Tyler Warren in most cases, or they're handing the ball off to Jonathan Taylor. Look, I get it. Pittman is still a startable flex option in leagues. This is not somebody you're benching most of the time unless you have a stacked team or Rashee Rice is coming back or what have you. But the arrow was pointing towards a wide receiver 2 finish throughout the earlier part of the year. Now it feels much more like a wide receiver 3 status. Little boom busty kind of thing could be going on here. He's part of a sparky 3-man rotation with Downs and Alec Pierce. And I just think there's too much talent on this offense when everyone's healthy for everybody to eat. There's always going to be an odd man out, especially the way Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren aren't just getting utilized, but capitalizing on that utilization. That's the focal point of the attack. So specifically in this last game too, what I didn't like was that, you take the Rams game, which was competitive the entire way through. This game was closer than any of the other games they've had for most of the time. And that means that the offense wasn't playing from behind. There wasn't garbage time. There wasn't scraps. There wasn't heaving the ball. They didn't need to get Pittman as involved to pull things out. He was more or less irrelevant in another close game. So things like that prevent players from taking the leap. Sutton was able to move past that. Quentin Johnston is moving past that right now. Rome Odunze is moving past that right now. Guys who are focal points when the team needs to pull out a win. And I'm not sure Pittman or any wide receiver in Indy is ever going to be that necessary towards team success. So I like him to bounce back more than anyone else we're going to talk about today. If things do, if there is an injury or If he does build more of a rapport with Daniel Jones, but for right now, it's just not looking very murky, or it is looking very murky, not looking very good. Next guy, Kyle Pitts. Wow, from Pittman to a Pitts man. Nice. This is hilarious to even think that Kyle Pitts could still be a faller at any point in his career. He is down to tight end 14 in our seasonal ranks. He's tight end 8 on the week, though, with 10.9 projected points against the 49ers. Another guy that looked like he had finally turned the corner, but unfortunately around the bend was Drake London, just to throw him back to the other side. Falcons dropped 24, and really what should have been 31 if London kept his foot in. And we only get a 3-piece out of Kyle Pitts. And I just think that's kind of indicative of a lot of the fallers this year. You're seeing teams that are having a lot of success, and you're having players that aren't able to manifest that success in terms of fantasy points, with Pitts starting to become one of them. And as the season progresses, Drake London's not only getting healthier, but his connection with Michael Penix is picked up right where it left off from last year. I'm going to blame a little bit of those early struggles for London on that shoulder injury, because right now it looks like he's getting 100% of the team targets, and the chemistry with Penix, like I said, is just red hot. From a metric standpoint, it's tough. There's a lot to like about Kyle Pitts. He's generally top 10 to 14 in all the metrics you like: targets, target share, snaps, routes run, yards per route run. But tight end is not like running back or wide receiver. You guys know that. It's a top 6 game, maybe top 7, depending on the year. Once you start getting 10 to 14 in a lot of these, you're falling behind the 8 ball. You're looking at this. That's a correlation to like RB 30 or wide receiver 32, and things like that. You're just not getting. You have an incredible disadvantage. And I've seen different people try to correlate this to stuff. There's been blocking highlights where we've been putting guys in the dirt. And people will say, well, maybe he's being used more like a blocker, and that's keeping him down. But he's 4th overall at the position in route participation. So it's the same old. And this is with Darnell Mooney missing time. So are you going to sink your season because the tight end 17 at ADP was the tight end 10, and now he's back to the tight end 17? Probably not. For many people who lost Bowers, you lost Kittle, or you drafted Andrews, Hawkinson, Ingram, Njoku, Loveland, Jonnu, etc., you might have thought you had a backdoor tight end finish, and I'm just not sure if that's going to be the case anymore. I won't put him on the Dunzo list because it's a long season, and he has an incredible schedule. Truly, every single one of his matchups from here until January is green. So sober January comes around, we might be looking at a different player, and he's already had his bye, but just not a guy I would be counting on for your lineups. Now, let's get to the grand finale of our risers and fallers segment here. Kyle R. Murray. I minimized him down there because he has been minimized the rest of my life. He is down to quarterback 22 in our seasonal rankings. If he plays this week, he will be quarterback 23 with only a projected 15 points against the Packers. All right, let's pile on. Bury him. I said going into this year that I was going to make up my mind permanently on him depending on how the season went, and it didn't even take 5 games. We're going to talk a lot about this last week's performance, specifically by Jacoby Brissett. So I'll preface all that by saying I know the Colts were missing their entire secondary. They were legitimately losing guys pre-game, during the game, what have you. But the Cardinals were missing Marvin Harrison Jr., both of their top running backs, and multiple offensive linemen. So let's call it even at the very worst. Brissett steps up, and for his first start for this team, throws for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns, which he has not done since week 11 of 2022. That's as many times as Kyler Murray has done that in the last 3.5 seasons. And this was a 1-score game for 60 minutes, not some garbage time game script performance where he cleaned up. He made Zay Jones and Michael Wilson look like the guys that fantasy football hipster nerds write sleeper columns about every offseason. Trey McBride was tackled at the 1-yard line. He was that play away from having the best game of his career. I mean, it just everything you didn't want to see if you're a Kyler Murray stan. And this game comes at the tail end of a stretch to start the season for Kyler, where he's quarterback 16, 16, 22, 16, and 22 again. And he did that against what can only be described as a joke of a defensive schedule minus the Seahawks. So he does not play football. He does not play football the way that Drew Petzing in this offense wants to play football. And this game was indicative of that. He wants to be in shotgun. He wants to scramble around and buy time. This game was under center. It was throwing the ball over the middle. It was everything that you do not see from a Kyler Murray offense. And that's who we have. We have the 16th best fantasy quarterback playing like the 26th worst quarterback in the league, in my mind, honestly. He's just not a threat. His rushing is down, and he's not supplementing it with passing production. So until something changes, something falls his way, he is going to tumble down the QB tier list for me He's got the Packers coming up next and then a bye week after that. Now, I keep saying something nice about all these players at the very end. I'll do it right now. Following the bye, he gets the Dallas Cowboys, which have been quarterback rehab for everybody who has played them. So maybe that's what gets him sober. But until then, and if we're being honest, probably after, hey, Kyler, we're good. All right. Let's get to a quick wrap-ola here. We're going to do our Thursday night football preview, and I needed his name back up in here because it's just not a show without Evan, much like it wasn't a show without Pete. Let's get to Thursday night football preview. We have got Steelers, Bengals, Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, Titans of football, 4-1 Steelers visiting the 2-4 Bengals. As of right now, the Steelers are favored 5.5 points, over under 43.5. Some notes from this game. Thursday night football overs has hit all but the first one, actually. Commanders and no, I apologize. We're going to take that back. Strike that from the record. I'm saving that for later. Steelers are on a 3-game win streak they have covered every single one of those games. Rodgers is red hot. He's got a 105 passer rating right now, which would be 6th best for his career. DK Metcalf has a touchdown in 4 straight games. Bengals offense has turned a new leaf with Joe Flacco, so it's hard to use any season-long stats for what this offense is or what they're going to be, but he is coming off a 2-touchdown and no turnover performance against what some be considering a top defense in the Green Bay Packers. This is somehow not the oldest quarterback matchup in NFL history. Tom Brady at 43 took on Drew Brees at 41 back in 2020, and that barely tops it. But let's talk about fantasy implications. Decent sledding for the running backs. We have Jaylen Warren projected 14.2 points. I thought he looked very good in his return from injury last week, even if the overall stat line didn't quite bear that out. Chase Brown is projected 12.3 points, which what happened last week? We expected Chase Brown to get targets, and he got targets. So I think as the offense progresses, becomes a little bit more comfortable with each other, I don't think they're going to win any more games, but they're going to smash their easy buttons. Both of these defenses have been wildly susceptible to wide receiver production. So we have Jamar Chase at 18.3 points this week, Metcalf at 15.7, and Higgins, the forgotten guy, projected 11.3, which feels like a yikes when you look at it on paper, but the reality is that he had a season high in targets last week and a season high in yards. So let's keep our eye on the big fella. Final prediction, the over has hit. Here we go. See how I full circled that? The over has hit 3 out of 5 games. So I'm going to take the under, and even it out. Give me the under on this one, under 43.5, and give me the Bengals to cover along with a T. Higgins touchdown and a Jaylen Warren touchdown to ride it out. Nice. 22 minutes, 36 seconds. Folks, I am Chuck Bass. As always, this is Player Profilers, Risers, and Fallers. We appreciate you guys tuning in every week, having a lot of fun. I will see you Sunday morning for the start sits at 8 a.m. Hopefully my co-host Evan is feeling better out there, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.